Emma was born pretty clearly with no external ear, so it was pretty obvious from the start that we were going to have some challenges with her hearing. And we found out very early on that she did have an internal working of her inner ear, and so we were able to use the bone conducting aids. And so around 3 to 4 months, she was able to get her hearing aids on, and it was a pretty phenomenal experience to see her hear sound for the first time. Never forget that moment in my life. And we pretty much from the start knew that we wanted to do a bilingual, bimodal approach, which basically means using both spoken language and ASL. We're from a hearing family, and we have always used spoken language, and Emma is really our first exposure to the deaf and hard of hearing community, other than some work that I've done in the past. And so we did a lot of research and talked with a lot of providers to determine what was the best course of action, and it was kind of to embrace both the deaf culture and the hearing culture and try to expose Emma to both of those as much as we could. Her receptive language is much higher with the ASL, but her expressive language is almost non-existent. So what the decision we made around that was to send her to Mackworth Island preschool, and we just did that this fall. She actually will turn 3, like he said, in 10 days. And so she has been doing some transition time, and will start 5 days a week after Thanksgiving break. And she already is coming home using different signs. So we basically, they're amazing here. We really wanted to allow Emma to make the choice herself. And I think that that was the biggest struggle for us, was not knowing and not wanting to say, Emma, this is what you have to do. We wanted to say, here are your options. We'll learn them with you, and when you decide what you want, we're going to support that. The biggest challenge for Emma in terms of the hearing piece, and well, there's a lot of challenges, is that the Bajas cannot get wet in any capacity or they won't work, and they're very expensive. So the beach, the pool, bath time, bedtime, wake up time, can be very challenging. It's not anymore, although sometimes we think she uses that to her advantage, because she will get out of bed and not know that she's not supposed to be doing that.
Who wouldn't like to turn their ears off every once in a while?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
So we have found that that's a really positive way for her to use some sign during those times around the pool and still be able to communicate.
We want Emma to have exposure to both modes of language. Because as she gets older, she may choose that she wants to immerse herself in the deaf culture. And we want to support her if that's her decision. We don't want to make a definitive decision one way or another for our 3-year-old. That could impact her life in long term. So for us, it was that we are a spoken language home. That's from day one when we brought Emma home from the hospital. That was what she had the most exposure to. And so the reason why we were such an advocate to get her fitted for her bone-anchored hearing aids at such a young age was to get her exposure to not only her mom and dad's sound of their voice, but also just the ability for speech development. Because it's so crucial from 0 to 3 years old to have that if you are going to be in a spoken language environment, which primarily if she's with us, her older brother, because he is a typical, hearing 5-year-old that runs around, has high energy, and so she is playing kind of copycat, just like any younger sibling would, and so she really does speak very well. There are certain syllables and things like that, pronunciations that she has struggles with, but we've worked with her. We've had our team, our resources here at the island, and also when she was a baby, really help with that development. And then, as we had said, there's plenty of scenarios. We have a pool, so in the summertime, she is quite a bit time around the pool where she's unaided, where she's profoundly deaf. And so we utilize ASL and gestures to communicate with her to make sure that she's safe. And around water, around bath time, same thing, bedtime, because these devices give quite a bit of feedback if you kind of touch them, just like a microphone would. So there's time where she has to be unaided, and we definitely rely on gesturing and ASL. And hopefully as we get better and more proficient, that becomes a significant part of Emma's life and the people that surround her.
We had a lot of supports along the way through her IFSP team with a speech and language pathologist from Hear Me Now, and we had a family ASL support person as well as her teacher of the deaf. And so we were able to do intensive speech and language work. We did about 3 sessions a week with that, and we did listening and spoken language, so teaching her to learn to listen and listen to learn, and then to also practice, her articulation and actual speech production. And then we paired that with weekly ASL family sessions where our trainer would come into our home and she would teach not only Justin and myself and Emma and our son Quinn, but all of Emma's grandparents, her aunts and uncles, and even our aunts and uncles. So we had about 13 to 15 people every week coming in and learning ASL. We actually are still doing that to this day, although now doing it via Zoom. And we have continued to integrate ASL more and more into our lives. We would also have the ASL instructor go to Emma's daycare at the time twice a month to try to expose the peers of hers to ASL. So that's kind of the decision we made. We are by no means fluent in ASL, and we really did push the listening and spoken language early on because that's primarily the world that she lives in. However, we wanted to keep exposing her more and more as she's gotten older, and hopefully she'll be able to make a choice what language she wants to use as her primary language.
When we had Emma, and we knew that this was going to be something that we were going to tackle. We have a fantastic group of close friends, family. I mean, we really do have a village that is behind us and behind our daughter to support that kind of ASL learning process. And it was scary at first, very, scared to think that if you were to ask us at 30 years old, or are we going to go and learn a completely new language? We would have been like, you're crazy. But when it's your child, you will do anything. And you'll climb mountains for them to make sure that they have the resources that they need to succeed and make the choices that's right for them at the right time. So we're getting there. My wife is probably the best in the family, for sure. I'm taking second place there.
It's difficult. So we're both kind of perfectionistic, and it's really hard when you want to communicate something and you don't quite know the signs or how to go about that or how to place the words correctly in the sentence. But Melinda has really taught us that it's okay, and it's okay to ask people to slow down, and it's okay to tell them you're new. But it still is a pretty intimidating thing.
As much inclusion as we can get her exposed to, whether it's spoken language and that community or the deaf and hard of hearing community, is we want her to make sure that she feels like she can be included in either environment. And so that's really the driving factor of why we chose the bilingual bimodal approach for our family.
Right after it was confirmed, when she was like 6 or 7 weeks old, when it was confirmed that she was hard of hearing, we decided that we were going to learn ASL and do spoken language. And then we just kept on that path for the last 6 years. We started with baby sign, with just basic things, more milk, hungry, thirsty, awake, surprise, excited, just emotions and colors. And then once she started to come here to the Baxter, to Mackworth Island preschool, she started learning more ASL structure and the language itself. All the research that we did was basically the younger the child, the easier it is for them to learn a language. And we knew that the only deaf school in the state of Maine was this preschool program. And so we thought this was going to be the best and easiest opportunity for Olive to learn American Sign Language. We researched a lot of opinion pieces written by deaf people and children of deaf adults. The road to learning ASL was and is still a challenge. It's not easy to learn a second language, but American Sign Language is so fun that you want to learn more. So I started out by watching YouTube videos and watching this one family on YouTube who has deaf parents but hearing children, and they sign through their whole YouTube channel and all the videos. And so I would just kind of get comfortable watching it and seeing it that way. And then I did some online courses to learn the basics. But really, it's just been learning with Olive has been the easiest and the funnest. And we use a lot at home. So in our everyday conversation, I took the ASL classes here for the families of the deaf and hard of hearing kids. And Melinda was my teacher, and I did that for the first year. And then once I kind of grew out of that program, I started having one-on-one lessons with Kathy, who's the same person who was teaching Olive. So we were able to just talk for an hour. She would update me on Olive, what Olive was learning, and then I would just try and stay ahead of Olive because she was picking up the language very quickly. Olive is considered bilingual and fluent in ASL and spoken language. But I wouldn't consider myself fluent. I would be fluent if I was also 6 years old. But I would say I'm past beginner. So I'm not quite fluent yet. I would love to be fluent, but I can have a conversation easily enough. And then if I don't understand a word or a sign, then I'll have them finger spell it. But it's exhausting for someone to finger spell an entire conversation. And when I was first learning sign, everybody here who's deaf and communicates primarily with ASL, they did a lot of finger spelling for me, and they were very patient with me. It's actually really easy to add American Sign Language into our day-to-day. Olive wears hearing aids in each ear, and there are many times throughout the day where she can't wear them. If she's taking a bath, if she's sleeping, she's not feeling well, she typically doesn't want to have them in. And sometimes she just doesn't feel like having them in. And in those situations, we primarily use ASL.